What if suffering isn't the enemy, but the doorway to awakening? What if your deepest pain holds the key to your deepest peace? For over 2,500 years, the Buddha's insights have helped people not escape life, but understand it, transform it, and live it fully. In this journey, we won't avoid suffering. We'll walk through it mindfully, with wisdom as our guide. Welcome to Trandy Wisdom, where every story is a compelling truth. Buddha's thoughts on suffering. In Buddhism, the contemplation of suffering, Dukkha in Pali, is not a pessimistic worldview, but a profound recognition of the nature of human existence. It forms the very foundation of the Buddha's teachings, expressed with clarity and compassion in the earliest discourses of the Pali Canon. Far from being a message of despair, the Buddha's insight into suffering is the gateway to wisdom, transformation, and ultimate liberation. The Buddha did not merely observe suffering. He studied it like a physician diagnosing the root of an illness. He taught that suffering has a cause, and that cause can be understood, uprooted, and overcome. This path of awakening begins with a clear and courageous look at life as it truly is, impermanent, uncertain, and often unsatisfying, and leads toward a freedom beyond birth and death. 1. Seeing suffering clearly. There is a quiet wisdom that unfolds when we learn to stop running. In a world that teaches us to chase happiness and avoid pain at all costs, the Buddha gently invites us to turn around and look directly, honestly, at the suffering in our lives. He does not ask us to judge it, to fear it, or to numb it. He simply asks us to see it. This seeing is not intellectual. It is not a theory or belief. It is the beginning of mindfulness. In the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the Buddha's first discourse after his awakening, he proclaimed the first noble truth: there is suffering. He did not say life is suffering. He said there is suffering, a truth to be understood, not something to be denied or rejected. Suffering has many faces. It appears as the first cry of a newborn child, gasping for air in a new world. It appears as the silence of old age, when the body, once agile and strong, can no longer carry its own weight. It is the slow ache of illness that refuses to leave, the grief of losing someone we love, the loneliness of being misunderstood, the frustration of desire unmet, the exhaustion of chasing what never lasts. Birth is suffering. Aging is suffering. Illness is suffering. Death is suffering, the Buddha declared. Being with what we do not love is suffering. Being apart from what we love is suffering. Not getting what we want is suffering. In short, the 5 aggregates of clinging are suffering. Yati through this teaching is not a philosophical list. It is a mirror that reflects the truths of our ordinary days, our secret wounds, our restless minds. When we pause and look into this mirror, we begin to see not only our personal pain, but the universal condition of being human. We begin to touch a kind of shared vulnerability, a tender space that connects all beings. The Buddha never asked us to dwell in suffering. He asked us to recognize it, because only what is seen can be transformed. Denied suffering festers. It becomes anger, addiction, numbness, despair. But suffering that is embraced with mindfulness becomes a gate, an opening into compassion, into insight, into freedom. The Pali word dukkha is often translated as suffering, but it also carries deeper nuances: stress, unsatisfactoriness, imbalance. It is the sense that things are never quite enough, never quite secure, never quite still. We try to hold on to people, moments, feelings, but like sand slipping through our fingers, they cannot be kept. This is not a reason to despair. It is a reason to wake up. In the forest monasteries of old, monks and nuns would meditate on the body's impermanence by contemplating the breath, the bones, the fleeting sensations of joy and pain. This body is not mine. It is not me. It is not myself. They would repeat, not to escape the body but to see it clearly, to free the heart from its prison of clinging. The Buddha taught that suffering is not punishment. It is not a sign of weakness. It is the first noble doorway. To know suffering is not to be defeated by it, but to bow to it as a teacher. Just as a doctor cannot heal what she refuses to see, we cannot liberate ourselves from what we are unwilling to touch. In Majjhima Nikaya 26, the Buddha spoke of his own quest before enlightenment. I too, monks, being subject to birth, sought what is unborn. Being subject to aging, sought what is ageless. Being subject to death, sought what is deathless. Being subject to suffering, sought the supreme peace, nibbana. This longing, so human, so familiar, was the ground upon which awakening bloomed. It was not a rejection of suffering, but a deep, fearless inquiry into its nature that led the Buddha to freedom. To see suffering clearly is not to be consumed by it. It is to observe without drowning. It is to breathe with the pain, not suppress it. When we bring mindfulness to our discomfort, we begin to notice the subtle textures of our emotional life. Sadness that carries fear, fear that longs for safety, anger that masks hurt. This inner seeing is both gentle and fierce. It demands that we stop pretending and start listening. We listen to the pain in our chest, the tightness in our belly, the grief behind our eyes. We listen without needing to fix, without needing to escape. This is the heart of meditation, not to feel good, but to feel fully. In doing so, something miraculous begins to happen. Suffering softens. It opens. It begins to teach us. We see that behind every painful moment is a thread of wisdom. Behind every wound is a door to understanding. The moment we stop running is the moment we start returning home. The Buddha never said suffering was the end. He said it was the beginning. The first noble truth is not the final truth. It is the invitation. There is suffering, he said. It should be understood. Not denied, not rejected, understood. To understand suffering is to awaken the eyes of compassion. For when we recognize our pain, we begin to recognize the pain of others. We realize that behind every angry face is a frightened heart. Behind every harsh word is a wounded child. We begin to live differently, not in fear, but in tenderness. This is the deep seeing that liberates. It is not born of avoidance, but of presence. Not of control, but of surrender. It is what turns suffering into soil and pain into path. The Buddha's gift was not a religion of rules, but a way of seeing, a way of being, in which even suffering becomes sacred. Welcome this moment, just as it is. Breathe with it. Look into it. Let it speak. For when you truly see suffering, not as enemy, but as messenger, you are already walking the path of awakening. 2. Tracing the roots of suffering. To understand suffering is to trace it back to its source, not just in the surface events of life, but deep within the soil of our own minds. The Buddha taught that pain is not simply what happens to us. It is born from how we respond, from how we cling, and from what we crave. The storm is not only outside, it is also within. In the second noble truth, the Buddha revealed the cause of suffering, craving. He called it tanha, a word that means thirst, an unquenchable longing. This thirst does not begin in the mouth, but in the mind. It is the ache for something more, something else, something better. It manifests as the need to possess, to become, or to avoid. It drives us forward, again and again, into the cycle of birth and death. This craving takes many forms. We crave pleasant sensations, and when we have them, we fear their loss. We crave relationships, recognition, beauty, control, permanence. We crave to be someone, to be seen, to be loved, and at the same time, we crave to escape from discomfort, from uncertainty, from fear. Craving hides behind every grasping thought, every anxious breath, every moment we feel incomplete. The Buddha did not condemn craving. He understood it. He saw it not as a moral failing, but as a natural habit of the untrained mind. In the Samyutta Nikaya, he taught that craving arises dependent on feeling. When there is a pleasant feeling, craving clings. When there is pain, craving resists. And when the feeling is neutral, craving seeks distraction. It is a reflex of reaction, not reflection. We do not suffer because we feel. We suffer because we attach to our feelings, because we want to hold the pleasant ones forever and push the painful ones away. But feelings are like clouds. They come and go. Craving, however, builds a home inside them, erecting walls and expectations in a sky that was never meant to be held. To trace suffering to its root is to sit still and observe the seed of craving in real time. We breathe and we notice. Where does the thirst begin? Is it in the thought that something is missing? Is it in the resistance to what is? In meditation, we learn to watch craving arise, peak, and dissolve. We learn that it is not permanent, not a fixed identity, but a movement, a wave we do not have to follow. The Buddha described this process of becoming in the chain of dependent origination. Paticca samuppada. From ignorance comes formations. From formations comes consciousness, then name and form. Then the six senses: contact, feeling, craving, clinging, becoming, birth, and finally, aging and death. The whole mass of suffering begins not with life, but with the mind's inability to see clearly. When we look deeply, we realize that craving is never satisfied. It promises happiness, but delivers restlessness. It whispers, just one more. But that one more is always out of reach. This is not to say we must suppress desire or reject joy. Rather, we are invited to understand its nature, to touch it gently, without being caught, to see that even in the heat of longing, there is a quiet space of freedom. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha says, from craving springs grief, from craving springs fear. For one who is wholly free from craving, there is no grief. How can there be fear? When craving ceases, even for a moment, we taste peace. The water is no longer muddy. The flame no longer burns. This path of understanding is not abstract philosophy. It is something we can experience each day, in the urge to check a phone, in the way we speak, in how we react to praise or blame. Do we reach out of fullness or out of lack? Are we moving toward connection or simply running from our own discomfort? To trace the root of suffering is not to dig through trauma, but to observe the living roots of reaction in the present moment. It is to slow down enough to see that we are not our cravings. They arise, they pass, they are conditioned, but the one who observes them, that one is free. In Majjhima Nikaya 75, the Buddha compares craving to a butcher flaying a cow. Even if the body survives, the skin has been removed. Craving exposes us, making every joy unstable, every peace temporary. It is not that the world is cruel. It is that we carry hunger into every moment, and that hunger distorts our view. But the Buddha did not leave us in the shadow of craving. He pointed to its cessation. When we understand its nature, we can begin to loosen its grip. With each breath of mindfulness, we step out of the automatic and into the awake. We begin to relate to experience not as a possession, but as a passing guest. The more we observe, the more we learn to nourish the mind with stillness, not stimulation. We see that happiness is not in acquiring more, but in craving less. This is the revolution of the heart, not loud, not dramatic, but deep. It is the shift from seeking to seeing, from wanting to being. Every step taken in awareness is a step away from suffering. Every time we recognize craving and choose presence instead, we water the seeds of freedom. This is how liberation begins, not in some distant heaven, but in the clear seeing of now. The roots of suffering are deep, but not beyond our reach. They lie in the garden of our own mind, and it is there, in silence and attention, that we learn to tend them, not with force, but with understanding. As we trace the origin of suffering, we begin to walk the path, not of escape, but of transformation. 3. Transforming suffering. The end of dukkha. There is a silence that follows the storm, not the silence of numbness or denial, but the silence of understanding. The Buddha did not speak of suffering to leave us in sorrow. He spoke of it to guide us through, like a physician who diagnoses illness, not to deepen fear, but to offer a cure. The Buddha revealed the nature of dukkha only so we might discover its cessation. In the third noble truth, the Buddha taught that the end of suffering is possible. This is not a poetic metaphor, but a radical promise, a liberation that comes not from escape, but from insight. The end of dukkha is not the absence of all pain, but the presence of a different relationship with life. It is a freedom born from understanding, not from resistance. To understand the end of suffering, we must first understand how we suffer. We suffer because we want things to be different. We suffer when we grasp what cannot stay, when we fight what must change, when we seek refuge in illusions. But when the mind no longer clings, when the heart lets go of its demand for permanence, suffering cannot find a place to root. What was once unbearable becomes simply a wave on the surface of the ocean. In the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha describes this cessation as the fading away of craving, its complete relinquishment, letting go, and liberation. It is not something imposed from above, not given by gods or fate. It is something we uncover, like sunlight that has always been behind the clouds. This freedom is not distant. It is here, now, beneath the noise of our habits and reactions. The end of suffering is called nibbana, a word that means extinguishing or cooling. It is not a state of blank emptiness, but of profound peace. It is the extinguishing of the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion. These are not external enemies, but the inner flames that burn each time we say, "This should not be," or "I must have that," or "I cannot be happy unless." When these fires go out, what remains is not void, but space, spaciousness of heart, of mind, of being. The Buddha called this the unshakable deliverance, the end of becoming. It is a quiet joy, unconditioned and complete, a joy that does not rise and fall with praise or blame, success or failure. It is the joy of coming home to what does not change. This transformation is not a single moment. It is a gradual unfolding, just as the lotus rises slowly through muddy waters to meet the sun. So too does the path to freedom, open petal by petal. It begins each time we meet suffering not with rejection, but with mindfulness. It deepens each time we refrain from acting out our craving, and instead, simply breathe. In Itivuttaka 44, the Buddha said, "There is, monks, that which is unborn, unaging, unailing, deathless, sorrowless, undefiled, and supreme. Were there not this unborn, there would be no escape from what is born." These words are not mystical. They are direct. They point to a freedom that exists precisely because life is impermanent, because everything changes. Suffering too can end, But how do we touch this end in our daily lives? Not by trying to eliminate pain, but by seeing its nature, not by becoming indifferent, but by becoming intimate with each breath, each feeling, each thought. When anger arises, we do not follow it. When desire stirs, we do not chase it. We watch, we stay, we understand. And in that understanding, a small fire begins to cool. The Buddha often used the image of a traveler laying down a burden. Suffering is not who we are. It is what we carry. And when we see clearly, we can put it down, not with force, but with love. To let go is not to give up. It is to trust that we are more than what we fear or crave. It is to trust the ground beneath our feet. In meditation, we learn to return again and again to this ground. We feel the breath, the body, the moment. We see that we do not need to run. We do not need to become anything other than what we are. In that stillness, something shifts. The waves still come, but we are no longer drowning. We are watching from the shore, steady and aware. This is the beginning of the end of dukkha, not a dramatic transformation, but a quiet softening. It is when the grip of craving loosens, when the need to control fades, when the present moment is enough, and from that enoughness, love can grow, compassion can bloom, wisdom can rise, not as theory, but as lived experience. To transform suffering is to meet it fully and see through it. It is to realize that what we thought was permanent is impermanent. What we thought was self isn't self. What we clung to as mine is part of the vast unfolding of causes and conditions. This is not a loss, but a release, not a disappearance, but a homecoming. The end of suffering is not the end of feeling, but the end of being ruled by feelings. It is not the end of the world, but the beginning of seeing the world as it truly is, interconnected, impermanent, precious. When we stop demanding that life fit our desires, we begin to dance with life instead of fighting it. The Buddha did not promise that we would never cry again, but he showed us that even in our tears, we can find peace, that even in difficulty, we can find the path. This is the miracle of transformation, not that we are untouched by pain, but that we are no longer consumed by it. Nibbana is not far. It is the space between two thoughts, the silence before a reaction, the breath we choose to follow, instead of the craving we once obeyed. It is here, waiting, like sunlight behind the clouds, and when we see it, even for a moment, we know the end of suffering is not a dream. It is the most natural thing in the world, mindfulness. The path out of suffering, practiced as liberation. When the Buddha spoke of suffering, he did not stop at recognition or analysis. He pointed to a path, not a philosophy to believe, but a way to walk. He called it the Noble Eightfold Path, a living compass for human transformation. It is neither a commandment nor a doctrine. It is a practice, a path of presence, of wisdom in motion. It is the way we return to ourselves, and in doing so, we return to life. The Eightfold Path is not 8 steps to be climbed one after another, but 8 aspects of a single, awakened life: right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. These are not rigid rules. They are the shape of freedom, formed from understanding and nourished by love. Right view is the beginning. It is the eye of understanding that sees things as they truly are, impermanent, interdependent, and not self. This view is not intellectual. It is born from direct experience. It allows us to look at life without distortion, to see both the beauty and the fragility, without clinging to either. When we see with right view, we no longer ask life to serve our desires. We ask instead how we may serve life. From this clarity arises right intention, the seed of our actions. It is the quiet vow in the heart. May I think and move with kindness, with compassion, with letting go. Right. Intention is not driven by ambition, but by understanding. It shifts the axis of our life from getting to giving, from grasping to peace. Right. Speech is the practice of speaking truth with care. Words are not neutral. They can wound or heal, separate or unite. To walk the path is to speak in ways that protect life, that nourish trust, that reflect presence. In a world of noise, even silence can be speech when it is rooted in awareness. Right. Action is love made visible. It is the choice to live in harmony with all beings, not through guilt or fear, but through recognition of our shared vulnerability. To refrain from harming, from stealing, from misconduct is not restriction. It is protection of the sacredness of life, beginning with our own. Right. Livelihood is the food of our ethics. It asks, how do we earn our living? Do our work and values walk together? Do we bring harm through what we sell, how we serve, or whom we support? Livelihood is not only about money. It is about the energetic imprint we leave on the world through our labor. Right effort is not the force of will, but the energy of intention. It is not struggle, but steadiness. It is the gentle discipline of cultivating wholesome states and abandoning the unwholesome, not out of self-judgment, but out of compassion for the mind. When we stop watering the seeds of anger, greed, and delusion, and begin watering the seeds of joy, clarity, and stillness, transformation begins. Right. Mindfulness is the heart of the path. It is the act of coming home to this breath, this step, this moment, not to judge it, not to improve it, but simply to be with it. Mindfulness is the doorway through which all other aspects of the path become alive. Without mindfulness, view becomes ideology, speech becomes habit, effort becomes exhaustion. With mindfulness, the world becomes luminous. Right. Concentration is the gathering of the mind. Like a clear lake undisturbed by wind, it is not a trance, but a stillness that allows deep seeing. It is the fruit of mindfulness sustained over time. In concentration, we see the arising and passing of all things. We see that we are not separate from what we observe. And in this seeing, compassion flowers. The Eightfold Path is not a destination. It is not a badge or identity. It is the path that becomes you as you walk it. The more you live it, the more it disappears, not because it is gone, but because you are no longer separate from it. Your life becomes the practice. Your breath becomes the teaching. Your way of being becomes the message. In Majjhima Nikaya 117, the Buddha spoke of the path as the way leading to peace, to direct knowledge, to awakening, to nibbana. It is not reserved for monks or mystics. It is for anyone with the courage to live with clarity and love. It is for the mother washing dishes, the student walking to school, the farmer sowing seeds in uncertain weather. Each moment holds the potential of the path. When we pause before reacting, that is the path. When we listen without needing to fix, that is the path. When we look into the eyes of another and see not a stranger, but ourselves, the path is present. This is how liberation begins, not in some distant mountaintop, but here, in this very breath. There is no need to rush, no need to master all eight at once. The path is circular, not linear. To touch one is to touch them all. To begin is already to arrive. Even one mindful step plants a seed. Even one act of right speech sends ripples into the world. This is the grace of the path. It meets us where we are and invites us into where we can be. Practice is not escape. It is engagement with life in its raw, unscripted truth. It is the art of returning, again and again, to what matters most. The Buddha did not offer us salvation in the next world. He offered a way to be free in this one, not by transcending it, but by embracing it with eyes open and heart at rest. The path out of suffering is walked not in grand gestures, but in small, consistent acts of awareness. To follow the Eightfold Path is not to become perfect, but to become present. It is to let our very way of living become a lamp that lights the way, not just for ourselves, but for all beings lost in the dark. Suffering is not a curse to be feared, but a teacher to be understood. It speaks the language of impermanence, of longing, of the human condition, and it invites us to listen with open hearts. The Buddha did not promise a life without pain, but he offered a path through it, with clarity, with compassion, with presence. When we stop running and begin to see clearly, even our sorrow can become sacred ground. Let this be the moment you pause, breathe, and return to yourself, not to escape suffering, but to awaken through it. Thank you for walking this journey with us. If this story touched you, remember to like, share, and subscribe. And always, welcome to Trandy Wisdom, where every story is a compelling truth.